Howdy, all of you delicious people. I am here today to review The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Surprisingly, this movie was actually enjoyable. I thought that this movie was never going to go anywhere, and I thought that this movie, it's like, what is this going to be? Just a whole entire movie of Nicolas Cage jokes, but Nicolas Cage is on the rib. And actually, no, this movie goes on and is to actually go places, and I'm like, man, this movie was way better than I thought it was going to be. And it actually was really funny. um Going into this film, gotta say that it's immediately a great movie, and I would recommend people seeing it. I would recommend people going into either a theater or whichever, because it's worth it, or feels worth it. So, teeing it up, what is this movie about, and then where can you go on and see this movie? So, Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage is in this movie to play a more neurotic version of himself, and he does not have a daughter in actual real life. And so, the one thing that I was like, oh, okay, well, it kind of sucks that, if this is a movie about a legitimate guy, shouldn't he really be himself? Because Nicolas Cage was to go on and say that he is a much more cool, calm, collective, meditative guy, and it feels like there is nothing of that that's really in this film. So, but we do have Cage here that says that he did have fun playing certain characters, and he did um, enjoy just kind of doing just being involved in this film. So going on, we of course teeing it up. We have Nicolas Cage in this movie who's trying to go on and trying to get these gigs, and he seems to get consistently passed up for a lot of things. And so all of a sudden we have Richard Fink, who is to be played by Neil Patrick Harris here, who's like, well, hey man, bills are really starting to pay, build up. You should probably go on and try to find just anything at this moment. And Richard is to tell Nicholas about this birthday gig that's gonna cost $1 million for Javi to give to Nicolas Cage. And Cage doesn't want to go on and do this at first, but then he's like, you know what? How would I go on and do this? So Nicolas Cage goes on and does this birthday party for Javi, to then turn around and realize that the CIA is looking into Javi, because it seems that in the beginning of this film we find a girl named Maria, who is this daughter of this anti crime politician, and it seems that Javi might have some connection to this kidnapped girl. And so Nicolas Cage has to go on and become a spy for the CIA to help figure out where this girl is. And the more and more we go through this movie, we realize how the story is to go on, play out here. And I had a lot of fun. It was a fun film. So definitely a thumbs up review. Go ahead and check this out, even in theaters. But I can also go out of my way to say that you can watch this movie through a bootleg version to kind of see if you're really interested in the film, or just kind of be able to see this movie for absolutely free regardless. So with that said, let's go on and mention where you can see this bootlegish for free. I'm not exactly sure if these apps, in fact, the second recording, have this movie. But I went on and watched a certain app that does have a bootleg version of this. So either way, you can say you can see a number of things for free, even if it's not eventually The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. You can go on and watch a lot of new releases within this app. So, in fact. Rattling off now. First off, you can go onto an app through a Google search called Letter C Movies. Be able to go through a Google search, hopefully find this app. Dare in fact be able to download it, and you'll be able to see a number of things for absolutely free, brand new releases, premium access stuff, exclusive app items, so on and so forth. You can also go onto an app called, through Google search, Fox HD Movies. Regardless of what I say next, search for those words. So, because next up, you'll go on, you'll find a logo that'll say Fox HD Movies, but a title that'll say something different. It'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. But either way, search for that first thing that I said there. So you can also go onto a Google Play Store and search the word TV Crush, and you'll go on and find a app with a logo. Will say HD Movies with a kind of king crown off the side, and by golly, you'll be able to hopefully be able to watch a number of bajillion things for absolutely free. So, with that said, let's just go into double five time territory. Let's just go into much more spoilers about this film. I will not be able to go on and probably say scene for scene everything perfectly and whatever, but I'm going to do my best to hopefully have some fun and just kind of talk about this film as I go along. So, hopefully, I'll be able to remember everything because this movie kind of bounces around everywhere. But I had a lot of fun with this film. So let's go on and double five this bad boy up. Because it's about that time to just go on into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time again to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of this piece, we have a girl named Maria who is with a man. And so they're both going on and seeing Con Air together. And it's towards the end of Con Air where where Nicolas Cage's character meets up with his daughter and his wife that he hasn't seen for a long stretch of time because of prison. And we have the scene at the end of Con Air where he's going to give his daughter this bunny, even though it's a little disheveled. And Nicolas Cage's character is to mention that he wanted to kind of clean up, but just didn't have the time. So, and then of course they embrace and they have this nice little scene. And so Maria's like, oh my god, Nicolas Cage, yeah, he's so good. And all of a sudden, while these two are just going on watching this movie, probably smoking weed, it probably seems, we then turn around and have these scheme-ass men just burst into this room. And I'm like, what the f is going on? And they end up grabbing this girl and they end up taking her. And it's like, okay, that just seemed very random. So we then go on and we transition here to have Nicolas Cage going to a number of places. So first off, Nicolas Cage is to go on and make his way to meet up with some director who's working on a movie. So Nicolas Cage is to be really impressed by this director, so much so that he's like, yeah, I really want to be a part of this film. It feels like House of Strangers, which is a 1949 film. And so we go on and we have Nicholas who's talking to this director, and Nicholas is thinking maybe there's some way possible that he can win this guy over. And Nicholas is talking to this director. It's like, well, hey, do you want me to read for this movie? And the director is like, you're Nicolas Cage, you don't have to read. But he's like, well, yeah, but but I don't know, maybe because I really am interested in this movie. And so Nicholas goes on and just delivers this whole monologue or this whole bit of dialogue for this film, going on and talking about how certain muscles have to fire into the brain, and for you to kind of make a certain decision and stuff like that before you shoot somebody. And we have Nicholas that rattles off this whole line, and the director's like, okay, all right. So we go on, and like Nicholas is like, well, I guess like that's all I can do. And so later on, Richard is to go on and call Nicholas and tell him that like they went a different direction. Nicholas is just like, really? Like, I really wanted this role. To the point where he goes on and sabotages his daughter's birthday party while playing on this piano, singing this song about this time where him and his daughter were on this beach together. But then all of a sudden we transition to have Nicholas talking about how he didn't get this role and that he's just so ticked off about Hollywood and whatever. But let's pull back a little bit. So Nicholas is to go on to a therapy session with his daughter. And so this conversation with this therapist is to lead to them talking about a movie called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and how Nicholas is to love this movie, and so he wanted his daughter to go on and watch this film also, and she hated it. And Nicholas is like, well, yeah, like she probably didn't like it, but she loved like the visuals about it, or she loved some. And like his daughter's like, that's not what I like thought about it at all. It's just like, so we have it where like his daughter is to mention how like she realizes that he has or she has to be another version of him, and she doesn't want to be that. She doesn't want to go on and be just like her father. She wants to be like herself. And Nicolas Cage is possibly pushing that onto her, Abby. And so that's the kind of the conflict there. So after we have this therapy session, we then go on and have uh, Nicholas, who's going to some massage place with Richard, and they end up just getting whipped with these like tree branches. And we have Nicholas, who's just like, God, like this freaking sucks. And Richard is like, no, like the pain is good. And it's just like, you're getting whipped with bushes. Okay, sure. So that, of course, is when, in this spa moment, we have Richard who's explaining to Nicholas about how there is to be this like $1 million birthday party that Nicholas could decide to go to. And Nicholas is like, I don't know about that. So we go on, and so Nicholas is to go to this birthday party where he hears the news that he's gonna get passed up. And so after this whole birthday party, he goes back to his place where he finally just is to give in to go into this birthday party to Richard. And then Nicholas is also like telling Richard, it's like, well, like now also tell everybody that I'm retiring, that I'm quitting, that like I'm not going to be doing this anymore. Like there's nothing else that I'm going to do. And Richard's like, what? I'm through a tunnel. What was that? So Nicholas goes on and is to take this long flight to go on and meet with Javi. And so Nicholas goes and meets up with Javi that's at this big lavish place. And so we have Nicholas and we have Javi, and so at some points Javi is to kind of take liberties into himself and is to like put on this whole like performance and stuff like that that's going on, and Nicholas doesn't want to have anything of that. He's just like, wait, like you want me to just kind of come here and like perform this play for you, or like whatever you're working with, and like I just want to chillax, like I just want to go on and have fun. But then the guy is just like, no, like I like I'm like this whole story about him, and uh like him having this woman, and like things are ending up playing. So Nicholas finally does play along, and so they both decide to jump up this big, huge cliff into this water to escape from these people. And then Nicholas turns around and turns to Javi and says, like, "Oh my god, like we didn't know how deep this water was. We could have died." Because yeah, like that's technically like the whole thing. When you go on and you go anywhere and you jump off these big, huge like things, like you don't know how, like if you're gonna survive or not, because some people could smack their head on things and die. So we also have at some points in this movie where Nicholas is talking to his conscious, I guess, or his inner self, which is to be a guy named Nicky. And so Nicky is going on and telling Nicholas at some points in this film that he's Nicholas Cage. And that like this is like a much more confident guy, and so like really even at one point Nicholas is to kiss his own inner self, and like he's to mention how like Nicolas Cage kisses good and all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is a weird version of these two characters, but I guess it's also just really fun. So Nicholas goes on with Javi, and we have Javi who's talking to I think a girl named Gabriella, and Gabriella is mentioning to Javi, it's like, well, hey, are you going to give him like this movie you've been writing? And Javi's like, I don't know, like that would be a little bit much for me to not only like try to go on and ask this guy to like um, to do this party, but then also to turn around and force him to like also be a part of my movie. So, but we go on and we have these two kind of getting to know one another. And so while they're having this fun and this adventure and whichever, which leads to them like going into pools together and like all this kind of stuff. So we go on and we have Nicholas like exchanging like what's their kind of favorite movies. And so Javi is to go on and say that he, of course, is to love Face Off as his first favorite film. And Nicholas is like, oh, well, thank you. And so then the second one, I guess, is to be the Cabinet of Caladarby or Calagarby. And Nicholas is like, oh my god, like me too. It's one of my favorite films. And so then we go on and we, of course, have Nicholas like kind of waiting for Javi to like, well, hey, what's your third favorite film? Like, come on. And so we have Javi who mentions a movie called Paddington 2. And Nicholas is like, what? Like, wait a minute. Like, how can we go from the Cabinet of Calagarby to now Paddington 2? And so Javi's like, well, it made me want to be a better man, and this and that, and it makes me cry. And Nick is just like, well, wait a minute, like I need to see this movie then. So they go on and they watch this movie, and all of a sudden Nicholas is crying, and he's just like, yeah, like I get what you mean. And so I'm like, this rando movie of Paddington 2. Like it's just some kids film, and it was done in 2017. And we go on here and we have like these guys who are just crying about this film. And I think I remember seeing like Paddington, and like for me, like never a recognizable film. Like I just feel like there's so many of those like hodgepodge movies out there. We have like some bear who's to become a part of some family and stuff like. It's a very oddball movie, which I barely remember, but weirdly enough, I can like I remember like bits and pieces of it. But so pushing on. So we go on further and have these guys just have a lot of fun, and so all of a sudden we have Nicolas Cage who ends up getting approached by the CIA, and they're like Vivian and Martin are approaching Nicolas Cage to like just be like, well, hey, like we've been following this guy for X amount of days, and we need to figure out where this girl Maria is because we are led to believe that this guy is holding this girl. And so like we need your help to try to figure out where this girl is. So Nicholas is to go on and just be like, well, okay, like I'll help out the government. So we go on in this story, and so Nicholas is to eventually head to this party where he's going to go on, and he's going to go through all of this like security and reset all of them. And weirdly enough, we have Martin, who is to give Nick some drugs that he is to place upon his hand to give to this guy who's kind of come nearby this whole like camera, this whole like camera room setup. And so Nicholas is waiting for this guy to show up so he can put this kind of drug on this guy's head. And Nick touches his forehead by accident, and he's like, "Oh my god!" Like so. Nick is going on and going through like this huge, massive like thing of like just this drug kind of overdose, and so Nick is going on and like he's starting to just kind of drop, or he's starting to get like really like man like this is like he's starting to lose control of his body, or like his numbs are leg or his legs are numb. His numb his leg. Yeah, those are words, right? So we forcibly have to have Nick, who is to like go from out of this window to climb to this other window while he's losing control of his body, to get back into this room because this room is to have this antidote for Nick to be able to use. And I'm like, this is just like The Rock. And it's kind of funny because they do reference The Rock in this movie, as Nicholas is to kind of and Nick is to show up at this party, and so they like reference about The Rock and stuff like that. So we have it where Javi was to mention to Nick about this whole movie, and Nick goes on and tells Javi, it's like, well, yeah, like I'll probably be interested in your film. Like send your script to my agent, and like maybe we'll work something out. Nick never really looks at the script, and so we go on and have Nick, who goes into this camera room and is to inject himself with the anti-drug, or the god, what is the cure to whatever ails him, the antidote, there we go. And so because we have Vivian who yells the word action, and so Nick just kind of wakes up and he jabs himself with this thing, and then he goes on to then like perform all the stuff that he needs to perform, and he realizes that like they need more time, like the CIA needs more time. And so Nick goes on into the party and is now going to make this speech that he wants to be a part of the movie that Javi's working on, but like instead of the one that he had already wrote, Nick wants to take the time with Javi to make a movie and then put that out there. So now we go on and we have everybody that's like, wow, like this is really cool. So they go on and they start making this movie, and they're both doing like LSD, and so they're both taking LSD, and so they're driving around, and they're like yeah, like so they're driving around this place, and so we go on, and they're going through this part of town, and all of a sudden there is this like massive paranoia that they're having about certain like rando people, where Nick, of course, is getting Vivian like texting him, like asking about any updates, and Nick is just like, well, like I'm on LSD right now, I'm on acid right now, I had to, or otherwise my cover would have been blown. And they're like, really? Like, okay. So we have Nick that goes on and is talking to Javi, and Javi is mentioning that, like, hey, like, those people over there, are they looking at us? And Nick is like, well, maybe they are. And so, because they're trying to figure out this story, and like Nick is saying, it's like, well, hey, how about we have like some paranoia or fear in part of the film? And Javi's like, well, yeah, but what should we do? Like, how should we write this? So they go on and they write that it seems that this couple is to go on and continue to look at them. So they're all of a sudden running for their lives, and they find this wall. And so Javi is to kind of set up for Nick to kind of jump over this wall. And so Javi's going to be like the support for Nick to just kind of jump over this wall. And so now, like, Nick is trying to lift up Javi to get over this wall also. But Nick is to try to, like, with one arm, grab Javi and try to pick him up. And Nick drops Javi, and Nick's like, I'm sorry, but you're too heavy. And Javi's like, well, yeah, because I have a really big head. And so we go on here, and like Javi's telling Nick, it's like, well, like you need to go on without me. And he's like, no, I can't leave without you. And so like they have this really like heartbreaking moment between the both of them. And so all of a sudden, like finally Nicholas is to jump over this wall, and we then realize that Javi could have walked all the way around because there was this gap in this wall. And so they're like, oh, okay. So they just continue to start running away from these guys. And so we have it where like Nicolas Cage is to go on and drive this car because Nicolas Cage can drive a car better than Javi can, because Nick was to go on and do all of his stunts from Gone in 60 Seconds. So Nick starts driving this car and starts bashing into every single thing. He bashes into these bikes. He bashes into this wall. He bashes into everything, just to kind of prove the fact that he's not like this talented driver and whatever, especially when he's on LSD. So they go on and they're driving like madmen, and so this all of a sudden leads them to go all the way back to where Javi's place is. And so Nick all of a sudden is to see this place that is to be this kind of hidden place that Javi used to have. And Nicholas goes and wants to get in here. And so Javi's like, wait, like, don't go in there. And Nick is like, well, why? And Javi's like, well, like, this could really change our relationship forever. And Nick is like, well, I just got to go into this room. So they go into this room and come to find out Javi is to have this big, massive collection of all this Nicolas Cage stuff. Like, every, like, little bit of memorabilia this guy has. He has the chainsaw from Mandy. He has the bunny from Con Air. He has the God, what is it? The little ball things from The Rock. The things that were to, of course, make this kind of like, God, what was it? Like this illness that they were to like put all over the world. And supposedly if you go on and you inject yourself into the leg, you can go on and just kind of absolve yourself from this illness. So The Rock was a very weird and goofy title, or goofy movie. So where like Nicolas Cage was, of course, with Sean Connery. But it was also kind of interesting how Nicolas Cage was going onto this flight, making his way to Javi's place. And while he was scrolling around, he went on and he saw like one of his own movies. I think it was probably The Rock, where he ends up saying "a-hole," and so like Nicholas is like, oh, I'm not gonna watch myself. So we go on. We go on and we have all these props, and then Nick is to go on and see this statue of himself, like this waxed figure that is to be holding these two gold guns, and it looks just like Face Off. And we have Javi that is like mentioning that this thing costs like $6,000, and Nick Cage is just like, like would you sell this? And Javi's like, no, it's not for sale. And Nick is like, well, what if I offered you $20,000? And Javi's like, no. So we like, the funny thing of it is like, we think that this is just gonna be a set piece and we're never gonna go back to it, but we actually do, because eventually Nick Cage is gonna go on and use those golden guns through a good portion of this film. And so it's like, man, like they go on and they do some like references and stuff to like the movies that, of course, Nicholas has done. And I think that's like the fun part of this movie, is just kind of going on through this guy's career. And I think a lot of actors at some point will probably feel nostalgic about a lot of the stuff that they end up doing, but none of them would actually go on and do a movie about it. And I think that is a kind of an interesting or cool concept about people going on and like reflecting back at their career. But then again, you technically get that in certain movies like Mission Impossible, where it feels like certain things in Mission Impossible are to kind of reflect back from the original ones, or stuff like that, where we kind of go back to little beats here and there, but still. Anyways, pushing on. So we eventually have it where Vivian is to now tell Nick here that maybe they need to go on and add a kidnapping into the movie that they're putting together. And Nick is like, no, like, a kidnapping doesn't fit our movie. And Vivian is like, well, like, maybe you gotta get like some way for these people to be interested in your movie, and maybe that has to be it. Maybe that's the only way that you can go on and really be like thoroughly having people be excited about your film. So Nick is just kind of like, okay, sure, whatever. So Nick, of course, is to go on and talk to Javi about like, well, hey, like maybe we should go on and we should have a kidnapping scene in our movie because it makes a lot of sense. And Javi goes on and he's like, wait a minute. Like, I think that the main reason why you want to go on and have a kidnapping scene is maybe there's some inner turmoil about you and your real daughter. And that, like, you want to try to figure out some way to, like, make amends to your kid for how much time, like, you've been away from her. And so Javi goes on and flies both Olivia, who is technically Nick's ex-wife, and Abby, who is his daughter, like fly them all the way to where Javi and Nick are. So we go on, and Olivia and Abby are saying like, "Hey, we just like left. We dropped everything to come here. We thought this was some emergency, and now come to find out like." This guy is just telling us that we need like a moment to just talk with Nick about his problems, about his like. And so Olivia was like, well, hey, like we went on and like we like don't have any like we don't have anybody to like take care of our pets and so it comes like this whole ordeal. But Nick is to kind of sit down and is to talk to Olivia and Abby and mention it's like, well, hey, like I just, even though like I am very focused on my career, like there is certain things that like I do kind of want to talk about here. So we had Nick, who is to give Abby this photo of them being at that beach that one time, and then Nick is trying to like talk to his wife and trying to mend fences, and like Abby and Olivia is just kind of throwing this all back at Nick, to just say it's like, well, like it feels like he's putting on just like another performance, and that this isn't really legitimate. And so like we have Nick, who's like whatever he's saying, like they just aren't buying, and so we go on. We have Nick, who's just realizing that like whatever he's gonna do is not going to win over his family. So all of a sudden we have Javi, who is to kind of, while Nick is dealing with his family stuff, Javi is dealing with his family stuff because Lucas is to come in. And so Javi is to deal with his cousin named Lucas, who I guess Lucas to be the actual guy who is to go on and kidnap this Maria girl. So Javi is talking to his cousin Lucas and mentioning how Lucas is to go on and find out that Nick is working for the CIA. And because they've gone on and had some recordings done, and so like they have proof. So Lucas is telling Javi that he's going to have to go on and kill Nicolas Cage. And so Javi is to go on, and we also have a moment where Nicolas Cage is to be told by Vivian that there is going to come a time when Nicolas Cage should go on and find some guns because like he might be in trouble also. So because Vivian is calling Nick, telling him he's in danger, and come to find out, Vivian is actually being caught by Lucas's men, and Martin is dead in the background. And like we also had that moment where Vivian was to see Nick the first time around and talk about this Emma Stone movie called Cruise 2, which doesn't exist. and some Emma Stone movie. And Nick was like, "Oh yeah, like I remember working on that film." Like I'm sure Nick all the time ends up getting, because he ends up doing so many movies, and I'm sure there's a number of people that all like, because every celebrity gets it, where someone is to say like, "Oh, like you worked on this film," and they're like, "No, that's like Christian Slater, or uh that's Viggo Mortensen, or that's whoever." It's like, no, no, you were in that movie. It's like, no, that wasn't me. I was never in that film. And then it just goes on and on, where the person is just like, man, like, you really, like, come on. Like, it's like, no, I will, no. You need the IMDb? Like, do you want me to whip that out? That's the whole thing. Like, we have like IMDb now on our phones. Like, we have internet on our phones. We could just whip that out and just be like, yeah, I was never on this movie. Look at me. Look at my face. It's not me. So, but yeah, like people get mistaken all the time for certain celebrities, and like people won't let it go. Or like, there's a lot of times where I guess that it is cool that you look like a certain celebrity, and people will like recognize you, whatever, and just be like, hey, you want to take a picture together? And it's like, okay, sure, like, all right. And then like, hey, can you autograph this? Like, okay, I'm whoever. But anyways, so I've heard a number of stories by a number of different celebrities and stars and people who are to be famous, and like they have all these stories about like in the bathroom, like people go on and be like, "Hey man, autograph," and they're like, "Sure." After I'm done holding my dick, yeah, it gets wild. So, but like funny anecdotes aside, so Nicholas goes on and is to find this wax statue where he has these two gold guns, and so Javi is to whip out his gun, and Nick is to whip out his gun, and they have this standoff going on. And so now we have both of them that are just like, well, hey, like, why are we turning these guns on one another? Like, it doesn't make sense. And so Javi's just like, well, I'm just afraid of my cousin, um, because he is to like force me to want to go on and do this. And so Nick is just like, well, okay, like I think we need to go on, and we realize that like we're both real innocent parties here, so we should go on and go and meet up with the CIA to now like go after the real enemy here. So Nick and Javi go on to meet up with the CIA to find out they had gotten shot and they had gotten killed by the time they get there. So now we're forced to have these guys go on just like, well, I guess we need to go after Lucas and try to take him down. And so how are we going to go on and do that? Because also we come to find out that Lucas had gone on and kidnapped Abby, Nick's daughter. So we go on, and so what ends up happening here is they come up with this plan, and Javi is to immediately say, it's well, how about we go right to the front of this and we just work this out this way, instead of having to sneak around or whatever, like do some like cloak and dagger stuff. How about we just go right through the front? And Nick is like, well, how do you expect us to do that? So come to find out, it seems that Javi is to be able to have this like makeup kit to make Nick look like anybody. And so it seems that there is to be this guy named Sergio that Javi can make Nick look like. So Nick goes in there with this with his wife, dressed as this kind of other looking woman. So Lucas is to go on and meet up with this guy who is supposedly Sergio, and he goes on and is to kind of like push him down and is to treat him like crap. But then it seems that Lucas is believed that this guy is Sergio, and so Sergio or Nick and Olivia are going through this place trying to figure out where their daughter is, as well as Maria. So and I think there's also like there's two moments where Nick Cage and Nikki are together. Like there's the one moment where Nikki is trying to motivate Nick Cage to do all this, and because really we're having it where like Nikki is not like be able to convince himself that he can go on and like pull this all off, and Nikki's just like, well, hey, we're Nick freaking Cage, we're Nicolas Cage, like come on, like we're this action star, we should be able to easily do any of this. So we go on, and so Lucas is to go on and just kind of be like, hey, Sergio, what the heck are you doing here? As Sergio is to go on and find these girls and try to rescue them. And so Lucas is to figure out that like some of Sergio's makeup is starting to fall off. And so he starts peeling away all of this makeup to realize that it's Nick Cage. So Nick Cage is go on and whip out this gun, and it's to tell like his family to just kind of run out of here, as well as Maria, to just kind of protect them. So everybody goes into this car and tries to scramble out of here. And so Javi won't go because Javi's just like, well, hey, like Nicolas Cage is still in there, like he's outnumbered and outgunned, like I can't just go on and leave him. So Javi and Gabriella are going back in to help out Nicholas here, or Nick here. So they go on and they make it back in here while like Nick is on like having this gun to Lucas, as well as being surrounded by all these men. And so finally we have a moment where Lucas is going to shoot Nicholas, and it's like, well, hey, what is the last thing that you want to say before you end up dying? And Nick is just like, is to recite the exact same line that he was to say before about like the whole like before your brain ends up calculating what all you're gonna do, and like your body is firing and all this stuff, and coming up with this like this split decision. And Lucas is like, what the so Javi comes in, starts shooting all these guys, starts killing them all off. Then we go on to have Nick and Javi and Olivia just kind of running off here. So we then go on and have Javi with Gabriella that's going to stay while Nicholas drives off, and Javi's going to try and face his cousin and shoot up anybody that's going to be driving up to this place. And Nick is like, well, are you sure? And Javi's like, yeah. Like, so we go on and we have eventually Nick, who's to reunite with his family, and all of a sudden like Lucas is there. And so we go on and have this moment where like his daughter is throwing Nicholas some knife that he miraculously catches, and because Lucas is like holding on to Nick here and having a gun waved around, Nicholas turns, stabs this blade into Lucas, and kills him off here. And then Nick is to run back to his family, and they are to hug it out, and come to find out, instead of this being Olivia like it was previously, now all of a sudden it's Demi Moore. And so I'm like, hey, Demi Moore, it's been a while. So like it's great to kind of see her in a movie, even if it's like a second thing. Um, I'm kind of curious if Demi Moore had like anything to do with this actual film, because I remember like Demi Moore was technically like involved in like the first Austin Powers movie, and like so like probably for her like she was to also like maybe be involved in like the funding aspects of this movie, not the director part, but like the funding or the producing, or the like her company might have been involved in this somehow or another, and they just said like, hey, you want to be in the movie? So so we go on here and we have Nicholas, who's back with his family, having this kind of like sigh of relief kind of moment. And then all of a sudden we see that this movie is to end, but we then go on and see everybody's just kind of like, yeah, like in the theater, kind of like clapping it up for this film. And Nicholas is just like, yeah, yeah. And so they go on and they start to clear out. And so Javi all of a sudden is to meet up with uh meet with Nick here, and Nick is like, well, hey, like why weren't you in the theater? Like you could have heard all those applause and everything like that. And like Javi's like, yeah, I don't know, like I got really nervous. And so Nick was just like, well, okay, all right, like that's fine. So really it seems that like Nick and Javi might go on and do some other film at some point. But yeah, so we go on into this film, and really at the end of it, we have Nick's family who's kind of walking off, and Javi is talking to Nick about like, well, hey, like it seems that Vanity Fair wants to do a piece on us, and Nick is like, well, no, like I don't think I'm really interested, because he's looking at his family. And so like Nick is just telling Javi like, well, how about you just go on and do that piece, like it's your time, and like it's your movie. So Javi's like, okay, all right. So Nick goes on and he is to go off with his family instead to spend time with them. And so all of a sudden we go on, and there's a reason why I'm laughing about this. So we have Nicolas Cage with his with Olivia and Abby, and so what ends up happening is they end up talking about his belt, and like that he has like an animal on it. And so he goes on and he's to mention all the like the possible belt buckles that he could have had, where it's like, well, it either could have been the bees, and Nick was like, no, not the bees, kind of like the Wicker Man. And so like they go on and talk about like the scorpions and spiders and all this. So he just kind of settled on like the animal that he went with. So finally they're going on to like, well, like, hey, like what should we do next? Like what should we go on and just kind of fish up the night? And Nick is just going to Abby. It's like, well, hey, how about you like pick a movie? And Abby's like, well, like, do you want me to just kind of pick something that you would probably like? And Nick is like, no, like pick something that you would like, pick something that you like would enjoy, and like instead of having me pick for you. And Abby's like, well, have you ever seen this movie called Paddington 2? And so they go on and they rewatch this movie, and I guess that this is this girl's like favorite film, and I'm like, of course it is. So they go on and they watch this movie, and like nobody's crying, but everybody's like, yeah, this is such a good film. And like that's how the movie just ends. And so maybe I didn't go on and I didn't probably say every single thing about this movie or every single joke or whichever, but I got pretty dang near close. So with that said, I'm gonna go out of my way to probably just get out of here to go on and hopefully uh, just go on to do another review. Like there was that one funny moment also when Nick was to talk about that party, and Richard, who is Neil Patrick Harris, was going on saying like, "Yeah, like what a garbage idea that was," and Nick is just like, "Well, yeah, like I think I'm much more interested in doing that party," and Richard's like, "Well, yeah, like because of course that's a great idea. Like that was the best like thing that you could that you could do," and it's like, of course, we start to see like how a lot of people would go on and say how like bad that was, and then have to just turn around like, yeah, no, it's a great idea. Yeah, like thinking about it now, just because like the money involved. But anyways, so with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here so I can go on and do another review. So with that said, and who knows like how this is going to eventually be a thing that exists. And who knows if anybody's going to really watch it. So if you are going to watch it, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Because at the end of the day, it's time to say goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.